There are places that once made you feel completely safe. But sometimes those very places hide something deeply wrong. A new house, your own room, the treehouse out back, they all seem like your private world. Until one day, you realize you're not alone. In today's video, you'll hear 4 terrifying true stories about children, shadowy figures, and beings that only appear when the night falls. Turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready to enter a world of secrets you were never meant to uncover. Story 1. The Stranger in the Tree. I used to be a kid with a big imagination, especially when we moved to the suburbs of Brookmont, Maryland, a place with a wide backyard and a giant treehouse built into the limbs of an old oak tree. My parents called it a reward for the 3 of us after the move, but I quickly realized, not everything new is something to celebrate. My older brother quickly lost interest in the treehouse, and my younger brother was too small to climb up there, so I usually had it all to myself. I'd bring books, a few toys, sometimes even cookies, and spend hours imagining I was in another world. One afternoon, while cleaning out the little wooden fort, I found a folded note tucked into the corner of the roof. It was written in pencil. "Hello, I'm the Marshmallow Man. What's your name?" I laughed. Probably my brother trying to mess with me, I thought. So I wrote back, "Hi Marshmallow Man, I'm Danny," and placed the note right back where I found it. The next day, another note appeared. "Nice to meet you, Danny. What do you like to eat?" It was a little weird, but I found it fun. I wrote that I liked powdered donuts, and the notes kept coming one after another. "What time do you usually come here? Which window is your bedroom?" When I told my parents about the letters, they brushed it off as harmless make-believe. But I started to feel something wasn't right. The last question chilled me. "What do your pajamas smell like?" That night, while brushing my teeth, I heard a soft tapping on my second-story bedroom window. I pulled back the curtain, no one was there. But the next morning, I found dozens of marshmallows stuck to the window frame, glued on with something sticky like wood glue. My dad thought someone in the neighborhood was just playing a prank. But I knew. No one else knew which room was mine except one person. The next night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard the tapping again, louder this time, more deliberate. Swallowing hard, I got up and pulled back the curtain. A face was staring in. His mouth was full of rotted teeth, with the front ones sunken and missing. His eyes had a pale yellow glow like a cat's in the dark. He wore a beat-up hoodie, and around his mouth were sticky white smears of marshmallow, like he had eaten an entire bag of them. He smiled. I screamed. My parents came rushing in, but by the time they got there, he was gone. We called the police. They searched the entire yard, the treehouse, even the woods behind the fence. They found nothing. In the treehouse, there was only one note left lying in the corner. "I saw you smile, Danny. Can I come inside tomorrow?" From that day on, I never went back up to the treehouse. My family moved out of Brookmont 2 years later, and to this day I've never told anyone that the final note wasn't written in pencil like the others, but in something dark red, smeared and clotted like dried blood. Story 2. The Boy in the Woods and the Imaginary Friend. I never thought I'd tell this story. Partly because it's so strange, and partly because I still don't know if I've ever truly understood what happened to my son that year. We lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Our house was at the end of a cul-de-sac with a thick forest stretching out behind our backyard. I'm a carpenter by trade, so I had the skills to build my son Luke a sturdy treehouse out back. It was like a tiny cabin among the branches, complete with a roof, a wooden staircase, and a little window facing the forest. Luke was obsessed with it, spending hours up there every day. Things began to change when Luke started talking about someone named Jake. At first, my wife and I thought it was just an imaginary friend. No one in the neighborhood had that name. But Luke kept mentioning him more and more. He said Jake only appeared in the treehouse, that he lived at the edge of the woods, and that he didn't like adults. We figured it was just part of a game, until Luke started bringing food and old clothes up there. When I asked him why, he simply said Jake gets hungry, and he forgets things a lot. One weekend, Luke came home with a bruise around his eye. When we asked what happened, he answered without hesitation, "I got in a fight with Jake." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Luke wasn't lying, and the fear in his eyes was real. My wife grew deeply concerned. She begged me to tear the treehouse down, but I wasn't ready to do that. That night, I decided to check it out for myself. When I climbed up, I froze. Inside were dirty little shoes that didn't belong to Luke. Empty snack wrappers, cookie packaging, even an unopened carton of milk. Scrawled across the wooden walls were crude drawings in colored pencil. A fox, a bear, a massive spider with a human-like face. Not detailed, but eerie enough to make my skin crawl. Later, Luke told us that Jake lived with the forest friends, creatures with names like Bear, Fox, and Spider. They stayed near the treehouse, always watching. But only Jake was brave enough to come close. Then one evening, I stood by the window in our bedroom. It overlooked the whole backyard, including the treehouse. That's when I saw a figure. A skinny, ragged child quietly climbing down the wooden steps. It wasn't Luke. I ran outside, shouting. The child turned his head and bolted straight into the woods. I chased him, but after just a few seconds, he vanished like he'd never been there at all. We called the police. They searched the forest for hours, found nothing. No footprints, no signs. No one had reported a missing child. No one knew of a boy like that. Luke told the officers Jake just wanted a friend to play with, but he got sad when I didn't want to go into the forest with him. Then he started growling and yelling in a weird language. My wife believes Jake was a ghost, a wandering spirit in the woods. As for me, I don't know what to believe. A ghost or a feral child who somehow survived in the wild. Whatever he was, Jake never came back. But since that night, I always lock the back door, and I never take my eyes off the woods when the sun goes down. Story 3. The Figure in the Yard. I used to think the house I grew up in was the safest place in the world. It sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac surrounded by tall trees in a wide backyard, perfect for kids to run wild. In the middle of that yard was a treehouse my dad had built by hand over 10 feet off the ground, tucked among thick branches. It used to be where my younger brother and I pitched tents, read comic books, and told ghost stories until we were too scared to climb back down. I left home for college, but I came back every year for Thanksgiving. That year I arrived a few days early. My parents had to leave town for a couple days. They left the house in my care, nothing unusual. On the first night I brought along a little weed, a bad habit I wasn't ready to let my parents know about, and decided to sneak up to the treehouse for a smoke. It was cold, but quiet. There was something about being up there that made me feel like a kid again, carefree and detached from the world. I leaned back against the wooden wall, headphones on, scrolling through my phone while relaxing. About half an hour passed before the phone's flashlight accidentally pointed down toward the yard. That's when I noticed something was wrong. The lights in the house were on. I froze. The house had been pitch black since my parents left. I was sure I hadn't turned on a single switch when I came in. I quickly turned off the flashlight and sat in absolute silence. From the back door, a shadow moved, then another. 3 people, 2 men and a woman, all dressed in black hoods, up-gloved hands. They looked around, whispering to each other. One of them pulled out a ring of keys from his pocket. I felt a chill run through me. They had keys to the house. I tried to dial 911, but my hands were shaking so badly that I dropped the phone onto the wooden floor. It made a small clack just loud enough to echo in the quiet night. One of them looked up. He saw me. I backed away from the window, holding my breath. Below, I heard footsteps stepping onto the wooden stairs. He was climbing up to the treehouse. Panic surged through me. I grabbed whatever I could, an old flashlight, and when his hand reached through the door, I slammed it down on his wrist. He cried out in pain and fell. I heard swearing branches snapping and then them yelling to each other in some strange language, almost like code. Then they all ran off, disappearing into the darkness just as the sound of police sirens filled the air. The officers asked if I knew who they were. I didn't. They said it might have been a targeted burglary, that maybe they'd been watching the house waiting for my parents to leave. But the thing that kept me up at night was a detail I didn't share with the police. Right before the guy climbing up turned to run, he looked me in the eye through the doorway, and he smiled. A smile that said he knew I'd be there, like he'd been waiting for me to come up. A few days later, I checked the motion camera by the back porch. There was a clip from the night before around 4 a.m. A figure standing under the tree, face tilted up, staring at the treehouse for over 10 minutes. Not moving, not doing anything, just watching. The police didn't recognize him, but I did. It was the same man who climbed up to me. That shadow had come first. And if I hadn't been in the treehouse that night, would they have just walked inside and waited? Story 4. The Voice in the Dark. When I was a kid, I was pretty stubborn. Whenever my parents scolded or punished me, I had this habit of running away not far, just up into the treehouse in our backyard. I'd bring a blanket, maybe a pillow, and spend the night up there like I was doing something brave and important. I still remember that night clearly. I was about 11 years old, and I'd just gotten in trouble for fighting with my older sister. Fuming, I grabbed a flashlight, a sleeping bag, and climbed up into the treehouse like I had many times before. It was quiet, the air a little chilly with the breeze rustling gently through the leaves. From up high, I could see the whole neighborhood swallowed by the dark. Around midnight, I woke up with a strange feeling like something was wrong. There were no sounds except for the wind in the trees, but I felt it. Something was watching me. I lay completely still, afraid to sit up. Then I heard it. A whisper. Very soft. Tommy. I froze. Someone just said my name. I sat up slowly, holding my breath. Silence for a few seconds. Then again. Tommy. Come down here. It was a man's voice, deep and muffled, like it was coming through a mask. I crept toward the treehouse window, gripping my flashlight tightly. There was nothing in the yard but shadows. But I knew that voice was coming from nearby. Very nearby. I backed away and was about to scream for my dad. But before I could make a sound, a hooded head slowly rose up from the stairs leading into the treehouse. I went rigid. His face was swallowed in darkness, but I could clearly see the streetlight reflecting off a pair of glowing eyes. Eyes like a cat's. He stood there, half his body emerging through the floor, unmoving, silent, just staring at me. I backed into the corner, shaking. Then he whispered again. I saw you lying here, all alone. I screamed. I screamed for my dad, for my mom, until my throat burned. Suddenly the figure turned his head and vanished. I curled up in the far corner, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. A few minutes later, the house lights flicked on, and my dad burst out into the yard, flashlight sweeping wildly through the dark. But the man was gone. No sounds, no trace. The police came. They searched everything. There was nothing except for faint scratch marks on the tree trunk, stretching from the base all the way up to the steps. Deep gouges, long and sharp, like someone had clawed at the bark with their bare hands. The next day, we installed a camera in the backyard, but no one in the neighborhood saw anything. No one heard my screams. The police assumed it was some drifter or an addict passing through. But there's one thing I never told anyone. Not even my parents. Right before I screamed. When he whispered that last sentence, I watched his mouth carefully. It never moved. The voice didn't come from him. It echoed inside my head. And for years after every time night fell, I'd hear a whisper in my ear. Tommy, this time don't scream. Sometimes the scariest stories don't come from faraway places or wild imagination, but from the very house you're living in. If you've ever experienced something strange, chilling, or unexplainable, share it in the comments below. And if you want to hear more true stories like these, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell because we still have so many stories left to tell.